So welcome, welcome. We are so happy to see you here today. It's Wednesday, July 29th, 2026, and we are very happy to have Ben Allen joining us to talk about his candidacy for the insurance commissioner for California. And we're going to spend today asking questions and really focusing on the voters and what you guys are interested in. I'm Marty Walters. I chair our local VOAD group, which is the Voluntary Organizations Active in Disaster, which is a mouthful and a half. But we're really just a collaborative of nonprofit groups that do disaster preparation and response. So I'm one of your co-hosts, and now I'll ask Amber to introduce herself.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you for coming, Ben, and for all of our dedicated Firewise community members. My name's Amber Hughes. If you don't know me already, it's good to meet you, Ben, from a distance.
Nice to see you.
Yes, lovely. I am the county coordinator for Plumas County Fire Safe Council. I wear a number of hats, but one of my biggest one is a regional coordinator with Firewise communities. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so I think, Ben, we want to hear from you first and introduce yourself. Tell us why you're running and what's happening there, and then we'll get into Q&A after that.
Yeah, well, thank you, everybody. Just appreciate this opportunity to sit down and chat with y'all about this very important job. I don't think it's anything that you guys need to. A lot of places you go around the state, people think insurance commissioner seems very obscure and strange thing to run for. But we all know that in many respects, it's at the forefront of so many of these massive climate-related challenges that we have, especially with regards to wildfire. I'm somebody who's been serving in the legislature now for over a decade. I've worked a lot intensely on environmental policy, also on campaign transparency, political reform. I've been ranked number one in the legislature for my commitment to those issues by the California Clean Money Campaign year after year, because I really, want us to have a more transparent system. I've worked on education policy, but a lot of consumer protections, taken on powerful industries from utilities to petrochemical interests to oil companies, car dealers, hospices, and then of course insurance. On the environmental space, one of the many things I'm proud of was being the lead author of Proposition 4, which is, as you all know, obviously a really important statewide investment in wildfire resiliency, building out our water infrastructure, healthier forests, et cetera. I used to be the sub-chair of the committee that oversees Cal Fire's budget, and so I've worked in and around these issues for quite some time. Of course, we had these terrible fires in my district just last year, really awful experience. So much of our work focused on just making sure we could get people the help they needed in the wake of these terrible fires, both in the immediate aftermath of the fires, but also, as people were trying to deal with their insurance companies. And I feel as though I got a real front row seat to all the dysfunction of the insurance system in our state. And I've worked on several pieces of legislation to try to improve the consumer experience, from giving people more information and time before they get non-renewed, and some anti-price gouging measures, making sure that we penalize unnecessary delays in payouts, giving folks having a more science-based set of standards with regards to smoke damage, because we know that just because your house wasn't burned down doesn't mean that it's actually habitable, and also trying to increase the payouts in the case of total loss with regards to contents coverage. But I will say that as I've kind of taken this from layer to layer, I always knew about the work of the Firewise communities, fire safe councils, et cetera, as I've been in the Senate. But I have really come to deeply appreciate and admire and want to help, intensely help the work of all of our risk reduction champions around the state. And I know so many of you, at least in Plumas County, are represented on the Zoom. Just yesterday, Marty and I were talking about how we were on a kind of a statewide network of Firewise, Fire Safe Council folks. And from my perspective, your work is immensely important. It's going to be the question. In your success will help to determine whether the state will actually become a safer place to live and whether we can avoid the kind of human tragedy that my community just experienced last year that I am desperate to try to prevent. And it's really what motivates me to run for insurance commissioner, actually. Yes, I want a healthy market. I want more competition. I want to speed up the rate review process. I want to improve the customer service operation at the department and make it so that we have more than just one, less than one per 1 million Californians answering the phone when there's, God forbid, a disaster at the Department of Insurance. I want to improve the enforcement division. I mean, a whole slew of things that I'd like to work on that could help to improve the operations of the department. But at the same time, I really think that there's an opportunity here to use the power of the commissioner to help to shift culture in our state toward greater risk mitigation, greater fire prevention efforts. And I actually, I'm right now I'm in this interesting place because I'm also the chair of the Energy Utilities and Communications Committee. And we're all working on some of the issues involving the utilities and some of the massive challenges they have in terms of their business model, but also their risk and what they need to be doing to reduce risk and make it so much less likely that we're seeing ignitions from their lines. But I also think that there's so much that we can do to get the insurance industry to better incentivize and align focus in a way that will be mutually beneficial. And one of the challenges I come across as I travel around the state, and I've spent time in the Sierra, also in the Central Valley and the Central Coast, or wherever I go, I meet with really great local leaders that are doing incredible work to reduce risk, and yet they're not able to get a call back from the insurance industry. And I think the insurance industry pays a lot of lip service to this risk reduction work, but then it doesn't actually reward it in a substantive way. And the only way, from my perspective, that we're truly going to be able to scale the kind of work that you're doing on the ground in places like Plumas around the state is if there's a real incentive on the back end associated with insurance. I don't think we can demand of the insurance industry that they have to cover all the high-risk areas of the state without this kind of mitigation, without this kind of risk reduction work happening, both at the individual level, but also the community level, because we all know that even if you may harden your home to a significant extent, if your community doesn't do so, if your neighbors don't do so, you're still considered a high-risk policyholder. But the flip side is I don't think we can ever get the state, the citizenry, the communities, the residents to step up and do this kind of risk reduction work if they don't think that there's going to be affordable, available insurance there for them on the back end. And that's an easy thing for me to throw out there as an idea, but I actually think the one person who's probably best positioned to hold the insurance industry's feet to the fire to come through and follow through and hold them to all this lip service that they pay to risk reduction is the insurance commissioner. And that's one of the things that I really would like to spearhead and champion and just make sure that that we have them sitting down with your leadership and actually figuring out a path to really reward and incentivize the scaling of this risk reduction work statewide in communities like yours, but also in chaparral communities, coastal communities, desert communities, valley communities, wherever they may be. And that's what gets me really excited about sitting down with you. I want to thank you for the work you're doing because you're helping to make your community safer. I think with technology getting better and better, there's some new opportunities that didn't exist before. And I just hope that we can create a virtuous cycle here that could make a real difference. I'm proud to have a great support across the board politically from left to right, great organizations like the Consumer Federation and our California Professional Firefighters, and many, many other respected leaders and elected officials and organizations up and down the state. But I'm happy to open up the floor to discussion with you. And again, just want to thank you for all taking the lead and being such important leaders in reducing risk in Plumas County.
Really appreciate that. Thank you so much for that introduction. So I put a little note in the chat, questions for Ben. We're going to spend the whole rest of the time going back and forth and having a conversation here. So you can type your questions into the chat and we can read them. Amber and I are going to kind of hand off on that. You can raise your hand and then I'll call on folks as we go along too. So Amber, why don't you kick us off with a first question, and you guys could start to think about your questions and get them ready to ask.
And let me just also, I should also say I'm very jealous of you guys because you have to live in one of the most beautiful places in the world. I've driven through. I mean, very special part of the state, very special part of the world, and thank you for helping to keep it beautiful and safe.
We think it's pretty special too, so thanks.
Yeah.
So I thought I would kick it off with going back to what you said a moment ago, opportunity and culture. Rural areas are very unique, and it's often very much a cultural driven perspective. I'm wondering today, what would you like to learn about Plumas County, and what do you want to take away from this this process? And what will you take away from this learning process? Sorry, I had to get my words around that.
Yeah, well, certainly, I'd love to hear about the work you're doing. I'd love to hear. I mean, certainly, if there's anything that I've said or will say that is discordant with your experience or your sense of what needs to happen, I'd love to hear that because I'm still learning, right? I've spent a lot of time in your neck of the woods, but I'm an LA kid, and I'm used to my part of the state and Chaparral, and I've hiked. I mean, every summer, every weekend of my childhood, we'd go hiking up here in the Santa Monica Mountains. But I recognize what a different ecosystem. I've spent time, hiking in the Sierra as well, and spending time in communities there. But I certainly want to be informed and educated because, in the end of the day, this is a massive state, and I gotta know your region just as well as I know mine. But most importantly, I think for me, it's just learning about what you're doing, and maybe some of the best practices that you want me to be aware of in your work.
Well, Marty's bringing up a really great map. It's one of my favorites. Do you want to talk about that real quick, Marty?
I was just going to say, California holds multitudes. It's
It
such a
sure
big
does.
state. And we're the only county that is considered like the most rural in terms of the small size of our communities and our kind of remoteness from big metro areas. So I like this map as a little illustration.
So is this a density map or what's the?
It's actually the USDA has this, we use it a lot when we're writing grants, but looking at the degree of rural, and it uses both the size of the urban or urbanized populations, and then also how close you are to the nearest larger metropolitan area. And you can see Plumas County kind of sticks out there because we're kind of remote, mostly because of the mountains, right? We're
Yeah.
small communities and we're pretty remote. Okay, so I'll stop sharing while you guys can, if anybody wants a copy of that, let me know. It's a great
Yeah,
map.
yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, and so let's see if is there anybody out there that wants to raise a hand or wants to type in a question? Because if we don't get questions from you all, Marty's going to ask the questions, and then you guys are going to be all like horrified.
Or I'll start asking you guys questions.
Yeah,
Yeah,
no, we
yeah,
have a question. So
yeah.
Johnny, from our Plumas Underburn Cooperative, Johnny, you want to go ahead and unmute yourself?
Yeah, hi Ben.
Hey,
My name's Johnny. I work with the Fire Safe Council. The program that I manage is the Plumas Underburn Cooperative, which is our local prescribed burn association. I don't know what your familiarity is with prescribed burn associations. There's about 30 in our state at this point.
yeah,
One just popped up in LA last year, so
yeah,
love what Emilio's heading down there. But basically, we just coordinate neighbors helping neighbors implementing prescribed fire on private lands in our backyards. And my understanding with fire insurance and prescribed fire is it's not liked because when you put that responsibility in the hands, or if you're trusting a landowner to be lighting that fire in their backyard, I don't know, like that would be by an insurance company with the risks and liability that could come with that. And as far as I know, it is not prescribed fire does not directly help reduce any premiums or show that you are doing the work in that direction. So I guess where are we at that I can direct the people who I work with who are implementing prescribed fire to help them implement it in a way that benefits their current insurance? And then do you have any plans to help integrate that type of work that n- makes the forest healthier and more resilient to fire as well as our homes? Do you see integrating that tool into your future legislation?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think prescribed burns are, and of course, cultural burns that we do with our native communities are both. I mean, they're absolutely essential. We all know. It's interesting. I was just at a really fascinating conference yesterday, and there was a professor from UCLA who had a big chart up, and he was showing the fact. This was an interesting thing. Um, there's actually been less fire uh, in the Sierra today than there were pre-European, pre-14, pre-European immigration, right? Um, whereas in the Chaparral, it's the other way around, where there's more fire now, and it's partly because the Chaparral, you have so much kind of, so many more. A lot of the Chaparral is near the cities. Quite frankly, it's near LA, and so there's just a lot more people and sparks and you know, power lines and cigarettes and all things like we saw would happen in our LA fires last year. Whereas in your neck of the woods, there's been this tendency towards suppression, which of course then leads to denser forests and all of the challenges that we see when there's a massive fire. But the work of the controlled burns, picking a day and when there's less, serious risk and being really thoughtful and careful about it. And, I mean, as you know, it has roots in even early cultural practices of the native peoples. And, from my perspective, it's a really important risk reduction tool. And by the way, there was a community that was, that was in my district that was going to have a controlled burn in Malibu, and then a couple of the neighbors got spooked and called this county supervisor at the time and got her to call it off. And they did call it off, so there was no controlled burn in that community. And sure enough, that whole neighborhood burned during this last fire. So, which again, we'll never know whether that would have saved the community, but it certainly, I certainly believe it would have. And it's a really powerful and pretty depressing cautionary tale that also speaks to the importance of what you're doing. So, from my perspective, it's an absolutely essential risk reduction tool. And again, I see it as my role, and this is going to be really hard, by the way, because they don't want to do this. They like to they like to be able to sit on the sideline, see the world as it is, make decisions based on their own actuarial tables and their own needs and the interaction with the global reinsurance market and everything else, and not actually have to help our problem, which is to make communities safer and more affordable. They don't see that. Their role in helping that problem, I think, is just kind of almost collateral to them. And yet I think the insurance commissioner can and must play a big role in making sure they do start to see their broader responsibility associated with risk reduction and making our community safer. So,
Well, I
yeah.
think when it comes to the prescribed fire aspects of things, that's one of the things that Johnny, a big, huge project is to get more and more people to embrace that as a useful tool that you can use safely. And, I think that it's early days still, even though, we should be further along with this. And somehow getting that to link up with some of the financial incentives, right? We have the 10 items that are in that Safer from Wildfires discount list. Like, let's add a prescribed fire element or something in there, right? Maybe that's something we could think about in terms of really widely getting much, much more wider awareness and adoption of
Yeah.
prescribed fire as a tool.
Well, let me ask you guys a question, and I think I know the answer, but I'd love to hear what you have to say. What sort of conversations do you guys have with the insurance industry with regards to the prescribed fire work? And let me start with that.
That's a good question. Johnny, please jump in if you or anyone here who wants to unmute and jump in,
Well,
please do.
Amber here. What I hear every day is that, Vera risk is an issue because initially when Firewise communities were, becoming and or continuing their annual renewal. Sometimes folks would have to prove that they're in a Firewise community, which has been confusing. Like, is that illegal? Is it not illegal? Is the expectation to have a map or not have a map? Being declined, getting letters if you don't show proof of mitigation. Is that illegal or not legal? I think those are heavy hitting topics among my Firewise communities.
Yeah.
Proof of mitigation and how much is allowed and not allowed, based
Yeah.
on the conversation between NFPA and the insurance organization, plus the homeowner themselves.
Yeah. And it seems as though, and again, these may be, it seems to me that there's too much interaction directly between the homeowner and the insurer. And there's not enough, whereas we all know that really obviously the homeowner can do a lot. There's no question, but these risks are at least with regards to fire, and it's different when it comes to a busted water main or something like that. But at least with regards to fire, it's so much more of a collective problem. And yet there's not really a mechanism right now, at least on a scaled basis, for real conversation between the insurers and communities, like folks like you. My whole point to as I talk to people, as I say, okay, well, look, if the insurers don't think that what you're doing is good enough, let's have that conversation. Have them tell you what they need, and so you can, and at least as long as it's within reason, you can start to implement what they need. But that then has to be followed on with them really stepping up and offering people available affordable insurance. But it just seems to me that right now there's just that this kind of collective work that you're all involved with is not getting adequately, it's just not paid enough attention to. It's not rewarded enough.
And as an individual, I think they have to go above and beyond to be recognized for their work. And
Yeah.
I think that is something that can be intimidating for folks because, you really have to advocate heavily for yourself, and you might just be getting a letter in the mail saying you've been canceled, which, may or may not be true. And then they scramble around trying to come up with all this, exterior data, or they're calling around to get support. And I've talked to Marty about this several times, especially in rural areas. You have these RAP committees or this RAP working group, but it doesn't seem to hit home in like rural areas. It's just there's a huge gap of boots on the ground for like real insurance education. I noticed that, and it falls on organizations like us, or maybe, and we're not really insurance professionals, but, and then you have these private insurers that are still trying to do their job, but where's that go between for the advocacy of the homeowner? I think that misses a point in rural communities heavily.
Yeah, Diane Bowman in our chat says, from what I have seen, insurance companies are requiring different things and there's no consistency.
Yeah, exactly. That's
Yeah.
my sense too.
So Daryl Webster has a question in the comment, and I just slapped this up here too because, rural communities in California tend to be less insured overall. And, we're among them here. And I actually spoken to quite a few people who are saying, for that $10,000 fair plan that I have to pay for, maybe I'm not gonna, my house is paid off. I don't have to have the insurance for my mortgage because I don't have a mortgage anymore. I think I'm gonna discontinue my insurance and maybe put more effort into, making my home defensible as I can make it.
Yeah.
So Daryl asks, in many wildfire prone communities, we know that regular fuels reduction and defensible space work and vegetation management can help reduce fire intensity and improve suppression opportunities and lower that risk. From an insurance standpoint, how would you approach that connection between the long-term mitigation work and the availability of insurance and affordability for communities that are really trying to reduce that risk.
Yeah. So, I mean, look, it's all, I mean, this is the whole, this is, I think this does a really good job of articulating the vision here, which is that that we have to figure out a way to reward and incentivize all of this, all of these various things. I mean, fuels reduction, defensible space, vegetation management, um, all of these things are we what we know make a difference for a community. And yet, again, one of the problems I see is that um, the conversations are typically happening between a homeowner and an insurer, and these broader, I think these broader community risk reduction efforts are just sort of written in to the set of expectations. Either there or they're not, by for the insurer, and the insurer just is going to make their decisions based on their perception of what's happening and their perception of the risk. And my whole point is we've got to actually help. We got to facilitate real conversations between you and the insurers. And but again, it's not just, I think it's got to be really driven by the commissioner, because otherwise a conversation is a nice thing to do, but they're not going to feel any real reason or compunction or sense of necessity to work with you unless that expectation is put out there by the commissioner. My whole point is to say to them, look, you know, you can't just walk away from rural California. We expect you to serve rural California. We also understand that it's not reasonable for us to expect you to cover everybody who isn't doing anything to reduce their risk. But the flip side is there are a lot of people that are really working hard to reduce risk, and let's have that conversation about how to meet their needs and your needs all at once. Um, and that's what I would love to get in. That's what I would love to help to facilitate and really help to spearhead. I think that's where I could be really helpful. I totally recognize the value of the sustainable insurance strategy, and I think it has started to make some difference, right? By getting the insurance industry to agree to provide coverage at a certain percentage within high risk zip codes. But we also have all seen the journalism about how they focus on the lower risk parts of the high risk zip codes, and how it's not really been living up to everything that it promises. Um, I just think that we need to take this one step further and really, have this dialogue between the insurers and the fire experts, builders, community leaders, the folks around, the folks that are part of, these kinds of firewise councils around the state, and then say to the insurance industry, look, guys, we are asking you to be part of the solution here. And if you want to see these communities implement, let's talk about what it's going to take for you to feel more comfortable insuring these communities at a lower rate. And I think that the commissioner is the one person who can, who actually can break through the deadlock a bit, the lack of communication.
I want to ask you a follow up on that too, because I started out by saying, a lot of people are sort of dropping their very, very, very expensive, or they just simply cannot afford. They're making choices every day about whether to buy groceries or, have insurance. We know insured communities are more resilient overall. We want people to have insurance. So what does that mean then? We have right now the choice between extremely expensive insurance. The entire county is in a very high wildfire risk area. We're all classified as very high. And then now I'm starting to see these non-admitted carriers coming in and offering insurance coverage. And I'm wondering what you have to say to these choices they have to make, right? What does it mean, first of all, to be a non-admitted? What are we buying when we're buying a non-admitted carrier policy. And then Annie Barber has a question there about with the California Fair Plan, can we even get the insurance that you would be able to afford as opposed to the insurance that we used to have, right? Like that to actually replace that we have. And I'm wondering if you can kind of talk a little bit about that, that juxtaposition between like thinking about it from a consumer standpoint, the choices that we have not to have insurance, go with a non-admitted carrier, sell our left kidney for that fair plan coverage. What's your perspective on that from the standpoint of the insurance commissioner's role?
Yeah. Well, let me ask you a question, Marty. Are you finding that the surplus lines are far more expensive than the admitted market policies?
That is what I'm hearing from the real estate industry. So what I'm finding
that's
is
typically the case. But yeah, I'd love to hear. Sorry.
No, I'm sorry. I'm talking over you too. I think that what we're seeing is that when people are coming in or trying to sell their home and then people are coming in, with those of us who already owned homes here, like we bought it before all this stuff went to hell. And, then trying to sell your home, the new person coming in is now faced with this enormous insurance bill. Like most of the homes in this county come with a huge insurance cost. And so that's, that's when people are having to make these choices. And it's really tough because it kills affordability here. It just kills affordability.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. So what we found is, typically these surplus lines, these not admitted carriers are charging a lot more. Your question is a good one. I mean, I think, when you take a non-admitted line, there are some high quality products out there. It's not as though they're all, shady fly by night operations, but it's definitely, you have to be more careful in looking at what you're buying, because they're part of this unregulated, not admitted market. So they're not subject to all the same set of standards and rules that you can count on if a product is an admitted carrier. That being said, I mean, we're seeing this as well in my neck of the woods too. In some of the high risk areas, people are having to turn to these surplus lines, or what they'll do is sometimes they'll buy Fair Plan as a baseline, and they'll get kind of an additional coverage from a surplus line from a non-admitted carrier. That they might be more specific, but I absolutely hear you. I mean, of course, this is becoming a major cost driver. And then I mean, the wildfire deductibles, exactly. So they're cutting out a lot of fire fire liability in general. And a lot of people have no idea that that's actually part of what they're buying. So that's one thing I would say is just make sure to be really, really careful, especially when you buy these non-admitted lines, to know exactly what they, what they're covering, with regards to fire. There's some that are now just trying to cut out fire altogether. And sometimes we had examples of agents that have not been fully upfront with people, or brokers that have not been fully upfront with people about how limited the coverage that they're buying might be. So please, one of the many things I think we all have to do is just make sure that people are better informed about what's actually on the table with some of these product lines. But from my perspective, it ultimately comes down to what we were just talking about. I think it's going to have to come down to really making sure that we're connecting the risk reduction work that you're doing and making sure that's actually being recognized by the industry. And that, again, you've got someone in the insurance commissioner's office who's bird dogging this, who's saying to these companies, look, you've got to work with these communities to come up with a risk reduction plan that is going to meet your needs, but that will also make it so that you feel that you can offer people affordable insurance in these communities. And the truth is, and I guess before I sound too general or Pollyannish, I will say that it's actually happening in real time right now in Paradise. Now, we all know that Paradise, and Amy talked about this on yesterday's Zoom, right? We know that Paradise is a new build, but I will say nobody was willing to underwrite the rebuild of Paradise until your friends and involved with Firewise, statewide, reached out to Victor Joseph at Mercury and had him come up to go check out the scene there and see all the work they were doing to reduce risk, the firefighting infrastructure, the way they were rebuilding the town, the ingress and egress, the wildland management, the technology they were implementing. And he said, I think these people are doing everything that we've asked them to do, and I'm going to underwrite the town. And so I point that out to make I make the point to say that there actually is precedent for us that we see out there with insurers that have actually been willing to step up and insure, previously harder to insure Sierra communities that are doing all of this risk reduction work.
Yeah, I think it's interesting too, though. And Dale Reddy makes a comment in the chat about the Safer from Wildfires discount. And he says it's so poorly implemented and vague, but it's a huge opportunity to improve resilience. It seems like insurance is only penalizing people with cancellation threats or rate increases, but without the clarity and uniformity, it isn't working to reduce risk. Isn't it mandated to offer discounts on the list, and why isn't it working now, and how will you fix it?
Yeah, I mean, I think we got those discounts have to be more substantive. But again, I think what's going on is that it's a Swiss cheese approach. There's not enough teeth in these policies that have been coming down from the insurance commissioner's office. And there's not enough, there's in fact, not even not enough. It doesn't seem to be any real conversation between the insurance industry and the Firewise community, the risk reduction community. I mean, they have their IBHS standards, and they've got people that are working on new types of homes, and they talk to the builders. All that is true, but I just see so little real dialogue happening between the community-wide resilience and the insurance industry. And I just think that this is a situation that's screaming out for greater conversation, collaboration, cooperation. But also, but by the way, I don't mean to sound Pollyannish. Like I recognize these are private companies that are in the business of making a lot of money for themselves and for their shareholders and their owners. So that's why I don't ever have any illusions that they're going to somehow see the light one day and decide to start trying to make California safe by themselves. But I do think that that's where the commissioner has to really drive drive this negotiation.
Well, and I think they're poised and ready to come into the marketplace when they can start making big money.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And they want us to do all the work beforehand. And I think that's where it gets to, one of the big issues, and you have Amber and me on the screen right now, and Dale just asked a question, but we work every day on this community basis level of trying to reduce risk. And that's exactly what the Fire Safe Council does. That's what I do. But the thing is that the funding, we talked about Prop 4 earlier. And for those of you guys who don't know, it's $10 billion. Prop 4 is this huge amount of money. CAL FIRE is getting a big chunk of that. Department of Conservation is getting a big chunk of that. We hope some of that will come into our community to help with this. Overall, it's not just wildfire, but it's also water protection. We are the largest water shed for, the entire state water project comes out of Plumas County, right? So we're like a really important watershed, and fire is such a big part of that. But the funding and the scope and the way that the plans that are written to implement all of that are focused almost solely on large scale fuel reduction, large scale landscape projects. And there's like no interest in dealing with the messy human factors of communities. People don't like doing it, and we're here doing that every day.
With the what?
It's
with
frustrating.
The
messy human factors, I always call it.
Yeah.
Because I always talk about messy human
That's
factors.
Right.
But working with individual people, and we're rural, we're older. We have a lot of vets. We have a lot of people who are, really want to go their own way. And to work on a community level requires a lot of resources. We have no resources. And competing for that, there's just like no mechanism for that. And Prop 4, $10 billion, how much of that is actually going to go into community versus landscape scale. And
Yeah.
I think we need to, it just urgently need to address this holistic picture of the communities that, and I'm preaching now, so I'm going to stop.
No. I totally agree with you. I think, and I, I think Tina, my chief of staff, maybe on this, and we can talk. I'd love to kind of circle back with you guys about it, about what we can do with regards to Proposition 4. Because you're right. There is so much tendency, because you're right. It's easier, I think, for everybody, whether it's the insurance industry or Cal Fire or utilities, to not have to deal with all the messy human factors of getting everybody along aligned, and you just go out and you treat a lot of forests and nobody complains, and you then declare victory. But we all know, of course, it's in these communities where the real risk lies in terms of people's lives and insurability in those communities. So I think you're hitting the nail on the head. I think it's part of why we're going to need people like you, Marty, to be at the, who sort of are not just fire wise, but human wise, right? There's a social psychology component to this that we've got to bring into bear. And look, I mean, this is not easy. I mean, this is not easy stuff. I'm not trying to. I mean, I'm sure you're probably thinking, "Oh, this guy doesn't have enough answers." I don't, because I mean, I've presented what I think is the direction where we have to go.
Yeah.
But and of course, I would love to just be able to wave a magic wand and require them to to cover every rural community in the state. But we also know that this is a free market, and there's a limit to which we can mandate. And I will say, I do think that some of my legislation reflects some of these costs. Like I am very aware of the costs and complexities of this hardening work. I'm actually running a bill right now to provide a state-backed low-interest loan program to help people harden their homes. I had a bill to create partnerships to try to encourage more public and private investment in community resilience. I totally agree. Let's go take a double look at Prop 4. There's no question there's some money. There's definitely pots in Prop 4 that can make a big difference. That could help communities like yours. But
Keep in mind that communities like ours in rural California, we're the last areas of California that are still affordable. And that's why, we tend to draw people who need an affordable option and want to stay in California, want to come to places like here. And then they come and they find that it's actually like really unaffordable. And not only that, but if my house burns down and I have to rebuild it, I'm not going to have the value in the real estate that you would have in Los Angeles, for example. I bought my house in 2006 and it's worth the exact same amount today that it was in 2006. Like we don't see equity and lots of dollars to be made in our housing, right? So I think that this affordability piece that goes along with developing resilience and doing all this work is something that we need to acknowledge across the board as part of a bigger strategy, right? And it's not just rural communities that need the investment in the community side of it. It's everybody, but we tend to not have the same wealth and the same resources
no,
to
that's right.
mount those from our own. We don't have Marin's wildfire authority. Like there's nothing like that will ever exist in this county, right? We don't have that mechanism and we don't have that resource. And so I think that's where maybe I draw the distinction between these very rural, affordable areas of California that, that have all of that rural population characteristics, have economic concerns that are very, very, very different from the wealthier parts of California.
Yeah.
But we also, we are doing really important work with watersheds. We're serving a really important role, and we're living in the highest risk areas too. So I think that's, figuring out how to make it a place where people can live and thrive is another piece of all of this
Well,
stuff.
can we, I love these messages. I'm trying to look at them right now. Do you want to go over them and give us a little bit of hope?
But this, yeah, we're getting to the end of our time here. So this is from an insurability imperative report that was just done not too long ago. And I just loved, thinking about insurance as part of a bigger picture, which is one of the reasons I thought it was so important for you to join us and talk to our Plumas County residents is that, that it insurability and being able to get insurance is such a vital part of our big picture of being both financially and like socially resilient.
Yeah,
And that the insurers are
totally.
just a key part of that and getting them to come to the table with us and along the journey. And so that they're not just waiting for us to do all the work so that they can get back into a market that is profitable for them, but they're actually coming along on that journey with us.
Yeah. Now, what from your sense? I mean, when I got a very I'd love to keep looking at that. Maybe you could send it to me, but from so that's of course what I'd love to see, and it was the spirit behind our partnerships bill that actually sought to drive investment from insurance and from utilities in these projects because I think we all see the mutual benefit associated with that cross investment. But I will say, as I talked to a professor yesterday from UC Santa Cruz about this very issue, he said, yeah, he basically was very skeptical that you can find a way to effectively bring the insurance industry along on this journey. So I agree with you. I'm so into that spirit, and I have to believe that if anyone can bring them along, kind of pull them along on the journey, it's the insurance commissioner, because you do have a whole slew of regulatory and enforcement tools, but we're going to have to craft this in a way that recognizes the fact that they have such a fundamentally different business model and mission than I have and that you have, and that's going to be the challenge here, I think, for us is to now I have to believe that there's ultimately so much value to the system for us to really focus on risk reduction, and there's so much cost associated with not. I mean, I just look at the costs associated with these catastrophic fires. So how do we capitalize on that delta, in a way that will actually lead to be a difference maker for communities like yours?
Very philosophical, but I think those are
Yeah.
excellent questions. And I guess maybe to close this out, and we'll see if I actually want to make sure that I recognize to Diane's comment. Diane Bowman lives in Gray
And by the way,
Eagle.
I've asked Patrick Wolf to jump on. Maybe Patrick has some comments. Patrick's a very sharp guy, an insurance expert. Ran in my race in the primary
Nice.
and has now endorsed me. We've teamed up. But Patrick, thank you for jumping on. We've been talking with these folks from Plumas County.
This is how you reward me for endorsing you? You put me on the spot?
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly. Well, I knew if anyone can handle it, it's you. But we've been talking.
I only just jumped up. First of all, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you very much, and thank you, Ben, for letting me know. I just found the report. I haven't had a chance to read through it, but maybe it sounds like the issue is how to incentivize insurance companies to help reduce risk and work with communities to reduce fire risk. Is that about right? Or maybe you want to sort of flesh out?
But to particularly rural communities that have high vulnerability, insurance availability or lack thereof is becoming a massive affordability challenge, such that people can't even sell their homes now. Yeah. And the industry just isn't writing. And yet there's all this really good work going on the ground that is very poorly financed. And how do we get them the help that they need? How do we incentivize a virtuous cycle that could lead to greater risk reduction and greater insurance availability?
Yeah, Marty, what is the situation with availability right now in Plumas?
Well, I was about to highlight, for example, Diane Bowman's on here, and she lives in Gray Eagle, one of our towns here in Plumas County, and they got canceled from their insurance, and their only option is the fair plan, with a wraparound type of policy. And I would say that, for us in here, in our towns, that this is very, I'm going to get wonky for a second, but in the towns, our bigger towns, so we have Chester, Quincy, and Portola are kind of the bigger, more little urbanized, where, we have less than 5,000 people. So they're very, very tiny towns, but they're more urbanized. They were not classified as very high risk until last year, during that big kind of redoing. And so we moved into the high risk category, and there's a lot of work that needs to be done in those towns to kind of get us more in line with all of the different defensible space, home hardening types of things that can get done. But ironically, more people in those towns have affordable insurance because for whatever reason, the insurance companies are still rating those properties a little bit lower risk.
Mhm.
So, if you're in one of those towns, you're kind of still okay. But then, and that's where most people are able to still have a State Farm or a farmer's type of policy. But if you are outside of those towns and you're in the state responsibility area, almost virtually every single person I talk to has the FAIR plan.
Yeah.
And those are those $10,000 a year FAIR plans that people are struggling with and deciding, hey, how am I going to do that? Like, how am I going to solve this
What's the
equation?
definition of a state responsibility plan area?
Yeah, the state responsibility areas are the lower density portions of California where CAL FIRE has
CAL
the
FIRE.
responsibility for
Mhm.
suppression. And so in Plumas County, we have a lot of Plumas National Forest is actually the biggest part of our county. And then we have these, WUI, and very much more the intermix part of the WUI that is the state responsibility area. And then we have 3 local responsibility areas with 3 all volunteer fire departments. I mean, we have very few, just a tiny handful of paid firefighters. And those 3 very small fire departments are responsible for all the wildfire suppression in those local areas. Now, of course, we have tons of mutual aid and all that other stuff that helps. But when it comes to planning and preparation and support, we don't have it. Like, our fire agencies are not like Marin Wildfire, right? We're like at the total opposite end of the spectrum, totally opposite end of the spectrum.
And
That's a resource question, basically. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
and do folks one thing that I'm sure Ben heard the same thing. Like when I was campaigning, one thing I heard when I spoke to folks in places like Plumas is that oftentimes there's a problem getting everyone to sort of all make the investments that are needed to make the community safe. Right? Like some homeowners will, but some homeowners like don't want to, and it makes
Yeah,
it and it
it's not
like
a matter of don't want to as much as we live in a place where we have a lot of people who are not full-time residents here, and you see it in our vacancy rate for our county is like 40%. It's not because we have 40% vacant homes, it's because we have a lot of second homeowners.
yeah,
And so
sure.
they're not here all the time. We have undeveloped lots that are not managed. And so I think that kind of threaded through the communities creates a lot of issues and really, really like challenges for the people who live here full time. So that's a big dynamic. And then I think the second thing is just elderly, disabled. We have, more veterans, more elderly than you're going to see in any kind of suburban or urban kind of community, right? So we just have less able and we've almost no financial resources to like really help them with those tasks of home hardening and defensible space.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's it. That's definitely one of the things I heard from folks, just the challenge of, like you were saying, Ben, the resources, getting the resources to make those investments, some of it having to come from the state to help, and some of it having to come from these folks who have these second homes, but maybe aren't sort of there full time and need to be incentivized with a carrot or with a stick to make the investment that's needed for the rest of the community, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Right.
So that is something that we are on top, like we feel like we're very on top of it. Amber, I've been talking a lot, but Amber is the genius behind coordinating this community level and the messy human factors that we always talk about. She understands that how to get communities to work together in a way that I've never seen with anybody else. And we need hundreds of Ambers out there working in our communities and being paid. I mean, trying to find funding is incredibly hard just for
Yeah.
that education piece. So I think
Yeah.
I know we're at time. It's a minute after the hour, and I promised we were going to keep this to an hour. We started a tiny bit late, so I think we're still within an hour. But I want to. I guess I think I want to give Ben a chance for you to kind of tie it up and give us a final statement, and then we'll say goodbye.
Well, this is a very helpful conversation. I'm going to make sure to take a look at this report, and I like the fact that it's. I one of the things I think I really, it seems as though the report actually is aligned with my philosophical vision as you described, which is to try to, understand the realities that you're facing and that the insurance industry, engages in with their business model, and somehow try to find a way to incentivize a virtuous cycle. They, in the end of the day, they can make money by raising rates on people and limiting coverage and nickeling and diming people, or they can make money through more abundance, right? I mean, people actually lowering risk, paying premiums because they're able to afford to live there. Them not having to pay out very frequently because we've done the work to reduce risk, and we're all safer and more affordable. And I want to see us move toward that second vision. And I absolutely recognize what a unique set of challenges are in a district like yours when where resources are limited, risks are high. It's a smaller community. The insurance industry probably doesn't give much of a thought, quite frankly, on the macro level to a place like Plumas, and yet a massive number of Californians are living in similarly situated counties in the northeastern portion of the state. And so, this is what we, this is my vision for a virtuous cycle that involves real investment in public and private, risk-driven risk reduction work that really helps to strengthen the work that you're doing, and that it can actually be pushed along by insurance policy. So, that's the vision. I absolutely recognize that it's going to involve a lot of messy human factors, involving your community and the insurance community and the regulators. But I guess I ask you to be part of this I think essential thought experiment with us. I'm certainly really committed to coming up with an approach that's going to serve our Sierra communities better than the status quo. Because right now it's at a breaking point. And yet we know that I guess what gets me excited is that the bones are there, right? Your work is underway. The technology with relation to risk reduction continues to get better. We see examples around the state where previously hard to insure communities are getting insured because of some of the stars aligning. And then the question is, how can we scale that star alignment effort? And thanks to you showing the way with regards to risk reduction in a community as large as Plumas, geographically large, I have to believe that there's a path here. And I guess what I ask you to do, and maybe we should circle up in a couple, month or two, but let's think about this more, and I'm going to need your help in, I'm certainly very willing, if I'm elected this position, to make it very clear to the insurance industry what a priority this is to me personally. That we come up with a workable plan to help our rural communities become more insurable. I'm coming, and I want it to be reasonable. I want it to be responsible. I'm not trying to demand anything that I think is out of the ordinary. But help me come up. Let's circle back and let's start thinking more about how we can come up with an actionable plan that's actually going to that's actually implementable.
Ben,
And
I'd like to invite you to Plumas County. Fire Safe Council
Yes.
holds we do little field tours where Fire Safe Home
I'd love that.
visit field tours, I think you should come say hi and come along on one of our tours to see what it's like when we're looking at various types of homes and landowners.
And you know what? We should bring insurance industry people too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm going to look them right in the eye and say, hey guys, you know, what's it going to take? Look at the work they're doing. What do they need to do for you to feel better about insuring these folks? I think, quite frankly, half the time that you're out of sight, out of mind.
Right.
I hate to say this, but that's what happened in Paradise. When they finally got this executive up to the town to walk the town, he realized, oh man, these guys are actually, they get it. They're serious about risk reduction. This isn't, you know, and he ended up underwriting the whole rebuild.
I think that's fantastic. And to close us out, I want to just quickly read Johnny's comment in the chat because I think it's a great one. It says, "Thanks for your time, Ben. Love some of the ideas you've brought to the table and the way you've engaged with this meeting. Best of luck in pulling it off. If given the opportunity, don't forget us out here in the woods, making risk reduction and community resilience happen." Thank you, Johnny. And thank you so much, Senator Allen. We really appreciate your time this afternoon, and best wishes with your campaign.
Thank you. Thank you guys. I really appreciate your time and
everybody.
attention, and thank you for all the work you're doing to make the community safer. It's not unnoticed, and I want to make sure we reward and incentivize this work.
Thank you so much. I appreciate everything. Thanks,
So,
everybody, for
okay.
joining.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.